Yeah, hello, good afternoon. My name is Ulrich Kuebler, and I'm leading a so-called ISS utilization office from Astrium company in Germany. And so I realized I'm the only European here, and this whole thing is about a national lab. So I try to explain a bit how this still could be interesting. And I think after all, we are going to an international space station, and working together there is key factor to make operations rather easy. Next, please. Just for explanation, Astrium is a subsidiary of EADS, and I realize big is not always beautiful, not for this type of business. I think for us, direct contacts are important. Next chart, please. And from all these various sites, Astrium is now merged together in the space field in Europe. There's basically in payloads one site, which is Friedrichshafen in the south of Germany, where we have about 110 people working in the payload area. Our headquarters is in Bremen, where the Columbus development of the module took place, and the ATV is the responsibility there. And then we have also people in Houston here, about 17 people working there, and also we have an office and some people at the Cape. Next. Astrium as such covers a whole broad area of space technologies, satellites, and services. We are a sub-part called Space Transportation, who is taking care of the Ariane business, ATV Columbus, as I said. And next chart, please. And microgravity research. Next. As I said, I think key is to work closely together with the scientists, and therefore we have organized ourselves not in a microgravity company as such. No, we have sub-branches. We really organize within our company in a life science branch, in the physical science branch, and then building lab support equipment. So the first contact, if you work with us, is that you talk to a scientist from your field, so who really understands your scientific and functional needs before we try and help you to translate this in technical requirements and develop the equipment. And there we cover basically the whole area from biology to human physiology, biotechnology, proteins, material science, fluid sciences, and so on. Next, please. And we do also the complete range from the beginning, from studies, breadboarding, which is mostly also done with company research money, but also with research contracts from our agencies. Then we have the facility development, construction, and we also focus on then the actual experiment inserts into these multi-user facilities, and we continue the whole process with operations, crew training, and then also sustaining engineering refurbishment of the units. Next. And we are doing this now for 25 years, first with Space Lab, and we started already also 10 years ago to have the first payload going to ISS. So all these payloads are either prime payloads from us, or we have major parts in these payloads. In the beginning, going directly into the Destiny module, because Columbus was not there till 2008. And now we are focused much more certainly on payloads for Columbus, but still we are used to work on all sides and in all modules of ISS. Next. You have seen some of these pictures, and these are NASA US facilities, more or less. They have been built by Astrium, 3 freezer systems, Melfi, to preserve your samples in the end, and then the material science glove box. Multi-user facilities as such, operated in the US, but nevertheless sustaining engineering is coming from us. And since we know the interfaces very well, next page please. We are building also for ESA under contract inserts, especially for the material science or the microgravity glove box. And I have to rush now through the following pages because I have way too much material to go there into detail. But just to give you an impression, the glove box, the MSG, is wonderful because it's a big, huge space, and you do very complex experiments in there, and you're hardly limited more by money than by space. And the first experiment was CCF now, one of our first complex experiments, the capillary flow experiment. also developed together with NASA in our German DLR agency. And then the phases experiment for investigation on, if this is correct, that was the foam experiment on the right side. I think that's a wrong title here. Investigation on aqueous and non-aqueous foams. Just gives you an impression you're rather free in having big setups in such a glove box. And if you want to have details about the payloads itself, you can talk to me or mail me, and I can answer this happily. Next. Then the Fluid Science Lab is one of the multi-user facilities where it gets smaller with the volume you have available, but on the other hand, you have much more of let's say, services installed in such a rack. So your interferometer is in the rack, and you have access via an optical window. And now you have to fit into these shoe boxes here and build your setups. Next page. It doesn't mean that you cannot be as complex. The first experiment there was Geoflow Investigation on the behavior of the liquid core of Earth. So you can have a electrical field between two spheres, and without gravity, it's a real or a field going to the middle of these two spheres. And now by rotating and applying electric field, you can simulate the Earth core movements. And this was first flight done in 2008, and now it was refurbished on ground and is just now brought up to ISS again for a second run with different type of liquids. Next. Then we have a experiment was prepared just till last week, phases to do investigation on drop-drop interactions. Unfortunately, there was a glitch in the video system of FSL, so the facility is not ready. The experiment stays on ground, but the scientists are not so unhappy because in the end they get a whole set of flight samples now to process on ground and get some additional of ground investigation done, which hopefully give additional insight before they have a possibility to fly later to the ISS. Next. Next experiment we built there is a boiling investigation experiment, all fitting in these containers for the FSL. Next. Then another facility also available to US researchers because it's built as an ESA NASA barter item is the Material Science Lab furnace. Actually, there are two furnaces built, so it's a modular system. You can exchange furnaces. There's a low gradient furnace and a solidification and quench furnace. And the PI in the end has a cartridge system available where he could select and specify the alloy he wants to have processed by these furnaces. And about 20 units have been processed in orbit so far. Next. Then we have a protein crystallization and diagnostics facility, which allows you to investigate the nucleation and the crystal growth behavior via microscopy and interferometry during the growth of the crystal. And this unit also flew in 2009 the first time, and now the process unit has been returned, and there will be an upgrade to the facility. Next. Now we come to the biological facilities. Key there for Biolab, as the second one I will show, is that we have centrifuge rotors installed, and by this we can provide you with a 1G reference in orbit, so you can differentiate whether an effect is maybe driven by microgravity or by radiation effects if you compare your 1G in orbit also with your reference experiment on ground. And key is you have, again, a standard experiment container, and you can decide what you would like to put in there. Next. This was the first experiment in this facility. It was an experiment to investigate on the waving and coiling of Arabidopsis roots. Next. And this is now an insert going to be processed later this year or early next year, which is with different muscle cells, mammalian cells, to investigate the metabolism and in response to the radiation or chemoluminescence and bioluminescence signals with the radiation effects. And you can fully automated in this laboratory inject liquids from reservoirs, put it in one of these small vessels, grow it there, and then you get your data with a photomultiplier and you just return data to ground. Next. EMCS now is a facility which is again a barter item between NASA and ESA. So this is available also as part of the national lab. It's again a centrifuge facility with a standard experiment container interface, which mainly had been focused on Arabidopsis, on plant experiments, but it's also open for cell culture, mammalian cells, and so on. Next part is the first experiment was a US experiment, investigation on the behavior of Arabidopsis roots in response to various light stimuli. Blue or red light exposed to the roots would either make them tend to move away or towards the light. Next. Then there was a threshold study on lentil roots to differentiate and find out where the threshold for gravity detection is. Next. And this was the most recent experiment finished 2 weeks ago. Genara about the gravity regulating of genes and protein synthesis. This is investigation on the root and secondary root formation in Arabidopsis. All these experiments, basically the same system. You grow seedlings, you fix it, you do observation, you return the hardware to ground, and then you do your genetic analysis, since these analyzers are not there yet. Next. Then there was a cooperative experiment where really gets international, so with JAXA together, was on the formation of the cell walls. Put partly in MSG, operated in EMCS. All this works together, and I think also the implementation partners work very good together to make all these different facilities work together as a whole lab. Next. And just maybe one thing interesting, there was a multi-generation experiment. There were some problems with the facility. The centrifuge and the facility was switched off several times. So by pure science, the experiment was not really a success. So with having something like ASS, you can really change your protocol in orbit. And then they developed a different type of experiment. So they switched the centrifuge on and off several times and could really register this response, the circumnutation, the circular movement of such a plant in respect to the G level. And this now led at least to a publication which can prove a theory from Darwin that the circumnutation movement is already in the plant and does not depend on gravity. So this is a result never planned, but at least you can make something out of it. Next. Then we have up there medical equipment. We have all the different type of typical data acquisition units, blood measurement units, what you have on a lab on ground, just transferred so that they would work in space. Next. And presently we're working on a concept for human centrifuge for ESA. So you can use this as a countermeasure instrument for humans on board of the ISS. Maybe proposed for the next MPLM going up that there would be enough space to operate the centrifuge. Next. And finally, the next example of payloads is we also work on external payloads. It's a physics experiment, fundamental physics, an atomic clock. So you compare your exact time measurements on ISS with the relay stations on ground. And by this, you try to prove maybe Einstein's theory of relativity, but in the end, it's an application for measurement for high accurate GPS systems and so on. And next. We also do operations for all these payloads, since Columbus and all these Columbus payloads. And the next page, it also shows in the next, all the other payloads in different modules. So it's a big part of our business now, which is increasing to take care of all the facilities from a sustaining engineering point. Next. And all this I rushed through I looked, this is in the NASA webpage, so all these experiments are described there in detail. So you can go through this. I think there's a lot of information next. Also, these two wonderful books we received here gives you a lot of detail. If you go in there, all these facilities are described there in detail. Next. But what I really want to focus on now, and this is maybe my message really, in order to make it easy and simple to operate, we had a system already launched first 25 years ago, flying 6 times. That was the old BioRec. It was a gravitational facility as well. Had small experiment containers. It flew to the Mir station, and it was a really, truly international cooperation. Next. And in the end, we did, on this standard now, 25 missions in 25 years, 125 experiments, which led to more than 300 recognized publications. And what's really important, we designed all, not we, a lot of the other companies, hardware for all these experiments. So there's a huge inventory of hardware existing, which is flight-proven hardware. Next. And just a few examples of a new set of hardware we are still developing for this. This is going on ISS. We are building an incubator for the Chinese now. And these experiments, they can really rely on flight-proven concepts, fly over and over again. It's much cheaper than always developing new hardware, and it gives you a great possibility to compare your results with others by rather using always the same type of systems. Yes, I think that's the last one. That's the last one. I know that was too much information and so on. If you have questions, please write or ask.